At 3 a.m., my pregnant wife Amy was rushed to the ER with complications. While she lay in her hospital bed fighting to save our baby, HOA President Linda Richardson stormed in and physically dragged her out, ripping the IV from her arm. Linda had no idea how much she would regret this. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching, also like and subscribe for more stories. It was 3 a.m. when my wife Amy started screaming in pain. She was 8 months pregnant with our first baby and something was terribly wrong. "Mike, help me," she cried, holding her belly. "Something's not right." I called 911 immediately and helped Amy to our car. We lived in Sunshine Gardens, a fancy neighborhood with strict HOA rules. But right now all I cared about was getting my wife to the hospital. The emergency room at City General was busy even at this hour. The nurses quickly took Amy to a bed and started checking her and the baby. Her blood pressure was dangerously high and the baby's heartbeat was irregular. "We need to monitor both of you closely," Dr. Sarah Martinez told Amy. "This could be preeclampsia. It's serious, but we can manage it if we act quickly." I held Amy's hand as they hooked her up to machines. The beeping sounds and flashing lights scared me, but at least we were getting help. That's when Linda Richardson walked into the ER. Linda was the president of our HOA. She was a tall woman in her 50s with short gray hair and cold blue eyes. She always wore expensive clothes and acted like she owned the whole neighborhood. "There you are," Linda said loudly, marching toward Amy's bed. "Do you have any idea what you've done to the community?" Amy looked confused and scared. "What are you talking about?" "Your ambulance," Linda snapped. "It woke up half the neighborhood with those sirens. And now I see you drove your car anyway. You called an ambulance for nothing." I stepped forward. "Ma'am, my wife is having a medical emergency." "This isn't the time. Don't interrupt me," Linda cut me off. "I'm talking to your wife about her violations of our community noise ordinance." The nurse looked shocked. "Excuse me, but this patient needs rest and quiet. You need to leave." Linda ignored the nurse and pulled out her phone. "I'm documenting this whole situation. Unnecessary emergency vehicles disturbing the peace and now taking up hospital resources for what's probably just pregnancy drama." Amy started crying. "Please just leave us alone. I'm scared about my baby." "You should have thought about that before you violated HOA regulations," Linda said coldly. What happened next changed everything. Linda stepped closer to Amy's bed and grabbed the IV tube connected to my wife's arm. "If you're well enough to drive yourself here, you don't need all this medical equipment," Linda said. "Stop wasting everyone's time and come home to deal with your violations." She started pulling Amy up from the bed, yanking on the IV line and medical wires. "No," Amy screamed as the monitors started beeping wildly. "Stop, you're hurting me." The baby's heart monitor went crazy. Amy's blood pressure spiked dangerously high, but Linda kept pulling, trying to drag my pregnant wife out of her hospital bed. "You're coming with me right now to face the HOA board," Linda demanded. I grabbed Linda's arm. "Let go of my wife!" But Linda was determined. She pulled harder, and Amy cried out in pain as the IV needle tore from her arm, causing blood to spray across the white hospital sheets. That's when Dr. Martinez ran in with security guards. "What is happening here?" the doctor shouted. "This woman is trying to remove my patient from medical care," the nurse explained quickly. Linda finally let go of Amy but stood her ground. "This resident violated multiple HOA regulations and needs to face immediate consequences." Dr. Martinez looked at Linda like she was insane. "Ma'am, this woman is having a high-risk pregnancy emergency. She could lose her baby or her life. Get out of my ER immediately." "I have every right to be here," Linda said. "I'm the HOA president and these people live in my community." Security moved toward Linda, but she held up her hand. "Fine, I'll leave." "But you," she pointed at Amy, "will be facing serious fines and penalties for tonight's disruptions. The HOA board meets tomorrow at 7 p.m. You better be there." With that, Linda walked out of the ER, leaving my wife bleeding and traumatized. After Linda left, the medical team worked quickly to help Amy. Her blood pressure was still dangerously high, and the stress from Linda's attack had made everything worse. "I'm so sorry that happened," Dr. Martinez said as she cleaned Amy's bleeding arm. "I've never seen anything like that in 20 years of emergency medicine." Amy was shaking and crying. "Is my baby okay? Please tell me the baby is okay." The doctor listened to the baby's heartbeat and checked the monitors. "The baby's heart rate is stabilizing, but we need to keep you here for observation." The stress from that incident could have triggered early labor. I was furious. Linda Richardson had put my wife and unborn child in danger over HOA rules. She had physically assaulted a pregnant woman in a hospital bed. I want to press charges, I told the security guard. That woman attacked my wife. We have it all on security cameras, the guard replied. The police are already on their way. Amy spent the next 6 hours in the ER. Her blood pressure slowly came down, and the baby's heartbeat returned to normal. But the trauma of Linda's attack had shaken both of us deeply. How can someone be so cruel? Amy asked as we finally drove home at 9 a.m. I was scared I might lose our baby and she was worried about noise violations. Don't worry about her, I said. She's going to pay for what she did. But I had no idea how quickly that would happen. When we got home, there were 2 police cars waiting in our driveway. Detective James Wilson introduced himself and asked us to explain what happened at the hospital. Mrs. Thompson, I need to warn you that what happened to you was very serious, Detective Wilson said. Physically removing someone from medical care could be charged as assault, battery, and endangering a life. Amy told him everything while I took photos of her injured arm where the IV had been torn out. We've already spoken to the hospital staff and reviewed the security footage, the detective continued. What Ms. Richardson did was clearly criminal, but there's something else you should know. He pulled out a thick file. We've been investigating your HOA for months based on complaints from other residents. Ms. Richardson has a pattern of harassment and abuse of power. I was surprised. What kind of complaints? Illegal fines, harassment of elderly residents, discrimination against families with children, and financial irregularities. Your case might be the final piece we need to bring serious charges. Detective Wilson explained that Linda had been using her HOA position to bully and steal from residents for over 2 years. She'd been charging illegal fines, keeping the money for herself, and threatening people who complained. The problem is, most people are too scared to testify against her. She has powerful friends and expensive lawyers. But what she did to you at the hospital crossed a line that even her connections can't protect her from. Amy and I agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation. We had no idea that our nightmare was just beginning. By noon that same day, we received an official notice from the HOA. Linda was charging us with noise violations for the ambulance, even though we didn't call it, disturbing the peace unauthorized emergency vehicles failure, to get pre-approval for medical emergencies disrespecting HOA authority. The total fines came to $5,000, with a demand for immediate payment. This is insane, Amy said, reading the notice. She's fining us for having a medical emergency? The notice also included a threat. Failure to pay these fines within 48 hours will result in immediate legal action and possible foreclosure proceedings. I called our lawyer, David Kim, who specialized in HOA disputes. Mike, this is completely illegal, David said after reviewing the notice. No HOA can fine residents for medical emergencies or ambulance calls. This is pure retaliation for your cooperation with the police investigation. Can she actually try to foreclose on our house? She can try, but it won't hold up in court. However, fighting it will cost you thousands in legal fees, which is probably what she's counting on. That afternoon, things got worse. Linda sent HOA security guards to inspect our property. They went through our garbage, measured our grass, and took photos of every inch of our yard and house. Looking for violations, one guard explained when I confronted them. By evening, we received another notice. Linda claimed to have found 17 new violations, including grass 0.2 inches too tall mailbox, flag pointing the wrong direction garden hose visible from the street welcome mat not regulation, size house numbers too large, car parked 3 inches over the driveway line each. Violation carried a $300 fine. The total was now over $10,000. Amy started crying when she read the list. She's trying to destroy us financially. But Linda had made a huge mistake. She was so focused on punishing us that she didn't realize she was creating evidence of her own crimes. Word spread quickly through Sunshine Gardens about what Linda had done to Amy at the hospital. Our neighbors were shocked and disgusted. Mrs. Carol Peterson, an elderly woman who lived next door, came over with a casserole and an apology. Amy, honey, I'm so sorry about what that terrible woman did to you, Mrs. Peterson said. We all heard the ambulance and we were worried about you. None of us complained about noise. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson, that means a lot. You should know that Linda has been lying about the neighborhood complaints. She claims we all support her actions, but that's not true. Most of us are terrified of her." Other neighbors started coming forward with their own stories about Linda's abuse. Tom and Maria Santos told us how Linda had fined them $2,000 for their son's birthday party being too loud at 6 p.m. on a Saturday. The elderly Mr. Johnson was charged $500 for having medical equipment visible in his window while he recovered from heart surgery. Single mother Jennifer Walsh was fined repeatedly for her children playing in their own backyard during quiet hours that Linda made up. The young couple next door, Brad and Lisa Chen, were threatened with foreclosure for painting their front door blue instead of the approved navy blue. "She's been terrorizing all of us," Mrs. Peterson explained. "But we were too scared to fight back because she has those expensive lawyers and claims to have connections with the city." I realized that Linda had been running the HOA like her personal kingdom, using fear and intimidation to control everyone. "What if we all stood together?" I suggested. "She can't sue the entire neighborhood." That's when we decided to organize a community meeting to discuss Linda's abuse of power. The next evening, while Linda thought she was safe in her power, 32 families gathered in the community center. This was more people than had ever attended an HOA meeting before. "We're here because Linda Richardson has gone too far," I announced to the group. "Yesterday she physically attacked my pregnant wife in a hospital bed. But we all know this isn't just about us." One by one, residents shared their stories of Linda's harassment and illegal fines. The list of her crimes was shocking. Over $50,000 in illegal fines, collected in 2 years, harassment of elderly and disabled, residents' discrimination against families with children, threats of foreclosure for minor or made-up violations, using HOA funds for personal expenses, falsifying community complaints to justify her actions. Mrs. Peterson stood up with shaking hands. "I'm 78 years old, and I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I've never seen anything like Linda Richardson's reign of terror. She's turned our beautiful community into a police state." The room erupted in agreement. People were angry and ready to fight back. "What can we do?" asked Jennifer Walsh. "She has lawyers and money." "We have something more powerful," I replied. "We have the truth and we have each other." David Kim, our lawyer, addressed the group. "Ladies and gentlemen, what Linda Richardson has been doing is completely illegal. HOAs have rules they must follow, just like any other organization. Ms. Richardson has violated numerous laws and regulations." He explained that we could file complaints with the state, sue for harassment and illegal fines, and even have Linda removed from her position. "But it will require all of you to stand together and testify about what she's done." One by one, every family in the room agreed to join the fight against Linda Richardson. The next morning, Linda received multiple legal documents, a formal complaint to the state HOA Regulatory Board, a class action lawsuit from 32 families, criminal charges for assault and harassment, a petition to remove her as HOA president, an audit request for all HOA financial records. Linda's reaction was swift and predictable. She tried to call an emergency HOA board meeting to address the rebellion in our community. But she had a problem. The other board members had heard about the hospital incident and were distancing themselves from her. Board member Robert Martinez resigned with a public letter. "I can no longer serve alongside someone who would physically attack a pregnant woman in a hospital bed. Linda Richardson's actions are indefensible and criminal." Board member Susan Lee followed. "The HOA was created to maintain our community, not to terrorize residents with illegal fines and harassment. I cannot support Ms. Richardson's continued leadership." Within 24 hours, Linda was alone. The entire HOA board had resigned rather than be associated with her actions. But Linda wasn't giving up without a fight. That evening, Linda showed up at our front door with 2 security guards and a man in an expensive suit. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I'm attorney Richard Blackstone," the man announced. "My client, Ms. Richardson, is prepared to offer you a settlement." "We're not interested," I replied. Linda stepped forward, her face red with anger. "You have destroyed my reputation and my position in this community. I've spent 2 years building this HOA into a respectable organization, and you've ruined it with your lies." "Linda, you attacked my pregnant wife in a hospital bed," I said firmly. "Everything that's happening to you is the result of your own actions." "That was a misunderstanding," she shouted. I was trying to help the community by addressing violations. Amy appeared beside me, her injured arm still bandaged. You grabbed me and tried to drag me out of my hospital bed while I was having a pregnancy emergency. You could have killed my baby. For a moment, Linda looked uncertain, but then her anger returned. If you don't drop these charges and lawsuits, I will make your life hell, Linda threatened. I have connections in this city. I can make sure you never work again. I can have your house condemned. I can destroy you. The security guards looked uncomfortable. Even they could see that Linda had crossed the line from professional to psychotic. Ma'am, one of the guards said quietly. Maybe we should go. But Linda wasn't finished. You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I've been running this community for years, and I'm not going to let some nobody family destroy what I've built. That's when Detective Wilson pulled up in an unmarked police car. Linda Richardson, you're under arrest for violating your restraining order, he announced. Getting out of the car with handcuffs. What restraining order? Linda demanded. The one that was issued this afternoon prohibiting you from contacting or harassing the Thompson family. You were served the papers at 2 p.m. today. Linda's lawyer tried to intervene. Detective, my client was simply trying to resolve this matter peacefully. By threatening them at their home with hired security? I don't think so. As Detective Wilson arrested Linda, she screamed at us, "This isn't over. I'll make you pay for this. You'll regret the day you moved to my neighborhood." Watching Linda being led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of justice. But I knew she was right about one thing. This wasn't over yet. Over the next week, Detective Wilson's investigation uncovered the full extent of Linda's crimes. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. Linda had been embezzling HOA funds for over 2 years. She'd stolen more than $75,000 by charging illegal fines and keeping the money for herself. She'd also been billing the HOA for personal expenses like vacations, spa treatments, and luxury items. She was treating the HOA like her personal bank account, Detective Wilson explained during a meeting at the police station. We found receipts for everything from designer clothes to expensive dinners, all paid for with community funds. But the financial crimes were just the beginning. Linda had been systematically harassing residents who questioned her authority or couldn't pay her illegal fines, the elderly. Mr. Johnson revealed that Linda had threatened to have his medical equipment removed and call Adult Protective Services if he didn't pay fines for property maintenance violations while he was recovering from heart surgery. Jennifer Walsh showed us recordings of Linda threatening to call Child Protective Services to take away her children if she didn't pay fines for excessive noise, her kids playing in their backyard. The Santos family had been threatened with foreclosure for hosting their daughter's quinceañera party, which Linda claimed violated cultural noise ordinances that didn't exist. She was using fear and intimidation to control the entire community, Detective Wilson said. What she did to you at the hospital was just the most extreme example of a pattern of abuse that had been going on for years. The story of Linda attacking a pregnant woman in a hospital bed attracted media attention from across the state. Local news stations picked up the story and it quickly went viral on social media. HOA president drags pregnant woman from hospital bed became a trending topic. People were outraged by Linda's actions and the broader issue of HOA abuse of power. Amy and I were interviewed by Channel 7 News. Amy, now obviously pregnant and still wearing a bandage on her arm, made a powerful statement. I was having a medical emergency that could have cost my baby's life. I was scared and in pain, hooked up to machines in a hospital bed, and this woman came in and physically attacked me because she was upset about ambulance sirens waking up the neighborhood. No one should ever have to experience that kind of cruelty. The interview went viral with millions of views online. Comments poured in from around the country, with people sharing their own stories of HOA abuse and supporting our fight for justice. Linda tried to do her own media interviews to defend herself, but they backfired spectacularly. I was simply trying to maintain community standards, Linda told Channel 12 News. If residents don't follow the rules, there have to be consequences. But Ms. Richardson, you physically removed a pregnant woman from her hospital bed during a medical emergency, the reporter pressed. She was being dramatic, Linda replied. If she was really having an emergency, why didn't she stay in the ambulance? The interviewer looked shocked. Because her husband drove her to the hospital? Exactly. She didn't need the ambulance, so calling it was a noise violation. The interview made Linda look completely heartless and out of touch. Public opinion turned completely against her. As the media attention grew, Linda's few remaining supporters began abandoning her. Her expensive lawyer, Richard Blackstone, withdrew from her case after the disastrous TV interview. "I cannot continue to represent a client who makes statements that damage her own defense," he announced in a public statement. Linda's friends in the city government also distanced themselves from her. The mayor, who had previously supported Linda's tough stance on community standards, issued a statement condemning her actions. "The city does not condone harassment or violence against residents, especially those experiencing medical emergencies," Mayor Patricia Williams announced. "Ms. Richardson's actions do not represent the values of our community." Linda found herself completely isolated. Her HOA position was gone, her legal team had quit, her political connections had abandoned her, and public opinion was overwhelmingly against her. But she still wasn't ready to give up. 2 weeks after the hospital incident, Linda made one final attempt to save herself. She called a press conference outside the community center, claiming she had been the victim of a conspiracy, have been unfairly attacked by a small group of troublemakers who want to destroy the property values and community standards that I've worked so hard to maintain. Linda announced to a handful of reporters. The Thompson family moved into our exclusive community and immediately began violating our rules. When I tried to address these violations in a professional manner, they attacked me both legally and in the media. She claimed that her intervention at the hospital was simply an attempt to discuss community concerns with a resident who had been avoiding HOA communications. "I never attacked anyone," Linda insisted. "I was trying to help Mrs. Thompson understand the importance of following our community guidelines." The few reporters present pressed her on the security footage that clearly showed her dragging Amy from the hospital bed. "That footage has been taken out of context," Linda replied. "I was simply trying to get Mrs. Thompson's attention so we could have a conversation about her violations." "Ms. Richardson, the footage shows you pulling her IV out of her arm," one reporter pointed out. "That was an accident. I was never trying to hurt anyone." The press conference was a disaster. Linda's explanations made no sense, and her refusal to take responsibility for her actions only made her look worse. That night, the local news ran the story with the headline, "Disgraced HOA President Continues to Deny Obvious Truth." Linda's trial began 3 months later. By then, Amy had given birth to our beautiful daughter, Emma. Amy had to testify while holding our newborn baby, making the contrast between Linda's cruelty and Amy's vulnerability even more stark. The evidence against Linda was overwhelming. Security footage showing her attacking Amy in the hospital, financial records proving she had embezzled over $75,000, testimony from dozens of residents about her, harassment and illegal fines, documentation of her threats and intimidation tactics. Linda's new court-appointed lawyer tried to argue that she had mental health issues that explained her behavior, but the judge wasn't sympathetic. Ms. Richardson showed a clear pattern of calculated abuse and theft over multiple years. Judge Patricia Martinez ruled. Her actions at the hospital were not the result of mental illness, but of someone who believed she was above the law. Linda was convicted on multiple charges: assault and battery for attacking, Amy embezzlement for stealing HOA funds, harassment for her systematic abuse of residents, fraud for her illegal fines, and fake violations. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay back all the money she had stolen, plus damages to the families she had harassed. The judge also issued a lifetime ban preventing Linda from ever serving on an HOA board again. "Ms. Richardson, you abused a position of trust to terrorize an entire community," Judge Martinez said during sentencing. "Your attack on a pregnant woman in a hospital bed represents the lowest form of cruelty. This court hopes that your sentence will send a message that such behavior will not be tolerated." As Linda was led away in handcuffs, she turned to look at Amy and me one last time. There was no anger left in her eyes, just the hollow look of someone who had lost everything through her own cruelty and greed. With Linda gone, Sunshine Gardens became a real community for the first time in years. The residents came together to rebuild the HOA with fair rules and honest leadership. Mrs. Peterson was elected as the new HOA president. Her first act was to eliminate all of Linda's illegal fines and return the money that had been stolen from residents. We're going to run this HOA the way it should have been run from the beginning, Mrs. Peterson announced at her first board meeting, with respect, fairness, and actual community standards instead of one person's power trip. The new board established reasonable rules and fair enforcement procedures. More importantly, they created a system where residents could appeal decisions and file complaints against board members who abused their power. Amy recovered completely from her ordeal and gave birth to healthy baby Emma. Seeing Amy holding our daughter in the same hospital where Linda had attacked her felt like the ultimate victory over hatred and cruelty. "Are you sorry we moved here?" I asked Amy one evening as we watched Emma sleep in her crib. "No," Amy replied. "We helped stop a bully who was hurting a lot of people. Emma will grow up in a community where neighbors look out for each other instead of tearing each other down." Our story inspired changes beyond just our own community. The state legislature passed new laws limiting HOA power and protecting residents from harassment and illegal fines. The Linda Richardson Act, as it became known, established clear limits on HOA fines and enforcement actions, protection for residents experiencing medical emergencies, requirements for financial transparency and auditing legal remedies for victims of HOA abuse. Amy became an advocate for HOA reform, speaking at community meetings and legislative hearings about the need to protect residents from abusive boards. "No family should have to go through what we experienced," Amy told a state legislative committee. "HOAs are supposed to maintain communities, not terrorize the people who live in them." Our story also inspired other HOA abuse victims to come forward and fight back. Support groups formed across the state, and legal aid organizations began specializing in HOA abuse cases. Looking back, it's amazing how quickly Linda's world collapsed after her attack on Amy. In just 15 minutes at that hospital, she went from being a powerful HOA president to a criminal facing years in prison. Her attack on a vulnerable pregnant woman exposed her true nature to the world and united an entire community against her. The very cruelty that she thought would intimidate us into submission became the evidence that destroyed her. If Linda had simply left us alone at the hospital, she might have continued her reign of terror for years. Instead, her need to dominate and control led her to make the biggest mistake of her life. Amy and I often talk about that night and how different things could have been. If the hospital security hadn't been good, if the other residents hadn't supported us, if the media hadn't picked up the story, Linda might have gotten away with her crimes. But sometimes justice works exactly the way it should. Sometimes the bullies push too far and finally face consequences for their actions. Today, Emma is 2 years old, and Amy is pregnant with our second child. We still live in Sunshine Gardens, which has become a model community for how HOAs should operate. Linda was released from prison last year after serving 4 years. She lost her house to foreclosure and had to move to a small apartment across town. The woman who once controlled an entire neighborhood now lives alone, working at a grocery store to pay her debts. Sometimes I see her at the store when I'm shopping. She looks older and tired, broken by the consequences of her own actions. She always looks away when she sees me, probably remembering the night when 15 minutes of cruelty destroyed her entire life. I don't feel sorry for her. She chose to attack my pregnant wife in a hospital bed. She chose to terrorize elderly residents and steal from her neighbors. She chose power and control over basic human decency, but I do hope she learned something from her experience. I hope she understands that every action has consequences, and that treating people with cruelty will eventually destroy the person doing the harm. As for Amy and me, we learned that standing up to bullies isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about protecting everyone who comes after you. Our fight against Linda saved our community and inspired laws that protect thousands of other families. Emma will grow up knowing that when someone does something wrong, good people have to stand up and fight back. She'll learn that power without compassion is just another form of cruelty, and that real strength comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves. Linda Richardson dragged my pregnant wife out of her hospital bed because she thought she had the power to do whatever she wanted. 15 minutes later, she began to regret everything as her world started falling apart. Sometimes justice takes years. Sometimes it takes 15 minutes. In Linda's case, it was exactly long enough for her to destroy herself with her own cruelty.